Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to wrap up all of my reading for February. So I have some stats here from the story graph and I have some books here and we're just going to go through and talk about them. So February was a weird reading month for me because I did a team challenge with the Facebook book club that I'm a part of. I'm a team leader, and so the type of event that we did this month, I didn't really know what I was going to be reading. You basically pick a prompt and you don't know what the prompt is until you pick the number, and then you get the prompt and you have to read that book. And so it was definitely a quantity over quality type of month for me. And that's why I didn't make a TBR video for February, because I really just had no idea what I was going to be reading. So let's talk about some stats. So I have my stats from the story graph pulled up here for February. I read 10 books with a total of 3,340 pages. My top moods were emotional, mysterious, dark, and reflective. No surprise there. Most of my books were medium paced, with a couple of fast paced books in there. I don't agree with all of those, but we can talk about that later. Page number. So this was kind of interesting. Only 2 of the books that I read were less than 300 pages, and everything else was at least 300 pages or more. So that's interesting. And then 100% of what I read was fiction, which is kind of abnormal. Typically I read some memoirs, self-help, true crime, things like that. So that's actually interesting that I read so much fiction. Oh, let's talk about my average rating. So my average rating for February was 2.78, which is pretty low. But like I said, it was quantity over quality. So let's get into the books that I read. So the first book that I read in February was The Nurse's Secret by Amanda Skenendorf. And this is a historical fiction about a girl who basically cheats the system and cons her way into a nursing program in Bellevue Hospital in New York. And so she does this because she really needs a job. And then she realizes that she actually kind of likes nursing and is kind of ready to leave her con artist ways behind and go through this whole nursing program and become a nurse. And of course, there's a love interest. She falls in love with a young doctor. And of course, you know, she's spending her whole time trying to make sure that people don't know that she cheated her way into the program. She's living under a different name and things like that. And I gave this 3 stars because it was just very, very average. Everything that you would expect to happen happened. It was giving some Asylum vibes at first, some like Nurse Ratched vibes if you watched that show on Netflix, but then it just kind of fell flat, and honestly, I couldn't even tell you what happened at the end at this point. The writing style wasn't my favorite, so I don't know that I would pick up another Amanda Skenendorf book, and like many historical fiction books, this was a little bit too long. So those are my thoughts on that one. So I don't know that I would recommend this if you were particularly interested in learning about nursing or state hospitals in the early 1900s. This probably wouldn't be the first one that I would recommend. I'm glad I read it, but honestly, I can't remember most of it, so I don't know what that says about it. Next, I'm going to talk about the books that I read for the X's and O's readathon. If you haven't been on my channel or didn't see my vlog, the X's and O's readathon is a readathon that I co-hosted with some friends here on BookTube. My friend Jessie created it, and then I co-hosted along with Lauren from Lauren Love Reads, Gwen from Gwendolyn Kensinger, and Summer from Seasons Readings. We had such a fun week reading some romance books, but also some other books that just fit into the prompts. And I was able to read a romance, a thriller, and a historical fiction in that week. So the romance that I read was our buddy read for the readathon, and it's X's and O's by Amy Leah. And this book is about Tara, who moves in with her brother's friend, who also works for the fire station. And she is a social media influencer about books. So she makes bookish content, which was definitely cool to read about. And he is definitely not into romance, not into relationships, really just a hookup kind of guy. And Tara is trying to figure out why she has so many exes. And so he helps her kind of track down her exes and figure out why their relationships went south. And she learns that it's mainly because she is super clingy and is planning their entire lives together on the first date. So it's a typical romance. You can kind of guess what happens, but I really liked that there was a little bit more deep emotional aspects to this than your typical rom-com. There was things that I wish we had more of, but I think I will pick up another Amy Leah book. Well, I'm saying I think. I know I will because I bought the first book in this series. So while I gave this one 3 stars, I definitely think that it's a worthwhile rom-com if you like the type of things that are in here. The next book I read for the X's and O's readathon was My Darling Husband by Kimberly Bell, and I read this for the forced proximity prompt. And this is about a family who had a break-in, and the wife and children were held at gunpoint, and the man holding them for ransom is somebody who obviously knows them. And so that has actually already happened, and you are getting the point of view of current day when the husband is being interviewed about that thing that happened. And then you also have the POV of the wife when it was actually happening. So you're kind of going back in time and going forward. So it was very interesting to have those 2 points of views and having the past timeline and the current timeline, and that the current timeline was done kind of in interview format. I liked that it had a little bit of an ambiguous ending. My main issue with this, I really did enjoy this. It was a fun, kind of like a popcorn thriller. I have continued to think about this, so that tells you something. But my main issue with this is that the daughter in this is like 8 or 9. And she's acting and doing things that like a 15-year-old would do. And they say that she's above average intelligence for her age, but still she would not be saying and doing those things at 8 years old. So that was my main quip with this book. This might have been 5 stars if they had made the daughter a little bit older, or if they had just made her do age-appropriate things. And then the last book I read for the X's and O's readathon was What She Left Behind by Ellen Marie Wiseman. And I read this because it met one of the conversation hearts for the conversation heart prompt with the word left. So this is not my favorite Ellen Marie Wiseman. We all know my favorite Ellen Marie Wiseman is The Lost Girls of Willowbrook. If I had read this book first, I don't know if I would have picked up more Ellen Marie Wiseman, but before reading this one, I had a 4-star read and a 5-star read. So I will continue to pick up Ellen Marie Wiseman, but this was not my favorite. And one of the reasons that it wasn't my favorite is because it felt very YA. So this story follows 2 different timelines. One in the early 1900s when a girl is sent to an asylum, really because she disobeys her parents is essentially why they send her there. And she is pregnant when she's sent there and nobody believes her, so she ends up giving birth in this asylum. And so you're following that timeline, but then you're also following a modern day timeline where there's a girl whose foster mother is tasked with archiving all of the items that were left behind after this state asylum has closed. Eventually learn how the 2 timelines converge, but it was a little bit messy. There was some loose ends that never really got tied up. And both timelines, the main character was a teenager, and so it just felt very YA. If it had been written YA, I probably wouldn't have been bothered by it because I would have known that it was intended for that audience, but it felt like somebody took The Lost Girls of Willowbrook and wrote a YA version. The next book has been highly anticipated by quite a few of you, and it's I Married a Lizard Man by Regina Abel. So this was sent to me by my friend Jess Z, and this was kind of sent to me as a joke, but then I was like, no, I'm actually gonna read it. And I planned on vlogging my experience reading this, but honestly, the clips didn't end up turning out very well. I lost one of them got corrupted, and it really just wasn't meant to be. I think, I don't know, I'm torn between 2 and 3 stars for this. I think I might have to land on like a 2.5. So this is about a woman who is sent from her world. She's a human, and she's sent from her world where mainly what they do is farming, and she's sent to another world that has these lizard people, and mainly what they do is hunt. However, there's nothing left to be hunted really, so she is tasked with marrying the chief and basically teaching all of their people to be farmers. This book is kind of like if 50 Shades of Grey and Star Wars were meshed together. It's very strange. He is a lizard man, And there is a lot of talk about the differences between lizards and humans and things like that. But it was kind of interesting to get both points of view and to get the point of view of this lizard man who's like talking about like your skin can't protect you from anything. Like that's soft, white, weird skin. Like that's not going to protect you from anything. And so it was kind of funny to get that aspect of it. I was shocked at how much world building there was in such a short book. It's only 200 pages. There was a good bit of world building, but there was also a good bit of smut. And it wasn't super cringy. I mean, okay, it was a little cringy, but it wasn't like terrible. Would I read another one of these? Probably not. Would I recommend it to somebody who is interested in trying out non-human romance? Sure, yeah. I think this would be a decent one to start with. So I am glad I read it. It's a fun story to tell. I'm probably gonna keep it because like, look at that. And then it just has some pretty crazy pictures in the back. So it's a good memory and it reminds me of my friend. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that one. Next book I read is Room by Emma Donoghue, and I had this book on my shelf for a long time. I watched the movie years ago and I really enjoyed it, so I wasn't shocked by this. I already knew what was going to happen and everything, but it was still a really good read and I still gave it 4 stars. So Emma Donoghue is I believe an Irish author, and I will actually be reading 2 Emma Donoghue books in March, so stay tuned for that. But this is about 5-year-old Jack, and the book is written from his point of view, and he lives in Room. And everything has names like that. There's room, there's mirror, there's toilet, there's mom, there's bed, and everything, that's everything's name. And he has a very unique view of the world from this tiny little existence in Room. What you end up learning as you go on is the reason why he's in Room, and it's not as cute and fun as he originally makes it seem to be as an innocent 5-year-old. And so it's very interesting to see a different perspective on like if J.C. Duggard had a son, this would be probably similar to what his perspective would be. And while this is a work of fiction, it is based on stories like Elizabeth Smart and J.C. Duggard and things like that. It's received a lot of awards, and it is banned in a couple of states. So definitely an interesting book, definitely worthwhile to pick up. I did get a little bit annoyed with the child's perspective after a little bit. I would have liked to have another timeline, but I also understand that it was a divisive, purposeful thing for it to be just the child's perspective. I do not recommend the audiobook. The child's voice or the adult making herself sound like a child was not good. Definitely read it physically. Next, I read Such a Pretty Girl by T. Greenwood, and this was another 3-star historical fiction for me. I read this because the prompt had something to do about dual timelines, and so this is following a girl in the 70s whose mother is an actress and a performer, and then she starts becoming a child model. And she does some pretty big modeling campaigns and things like that, and then she grows up. And then you have the timeline of her when she's grown and she has her own daughter and everything. And basically you find out that a picture of her that was taken when she was a kid, when she was modeling, has been leaked to a child porn site. And the picture is of her as a child dressed in very ostentatious adult clothing and made to look very adult. And so she's trying to figure out why the photographer allowed this picture to be put on these child trafficking sites, and she's trying to shield her daughter from that. And then you also have the timeline of when she was a child and doing all of these modeling acts. And it's kind of like if Toddlers and Tiaras and I'm Glad My Mother Died were smushed together. You got a lot of perspective of the mother who had a lot of trauma, was kind of neglectful, definitely a little bit of a narcissist, and you have a little girl who just wants her mom to be proud of her, and so she's just doing whatever her mom tells her to. And you have people who seem to have her best interest in mind, but do they really? And honestly, this was kind of boring. It kind of fell flat for me. I enjoy T. Greenwood's writing. It's easy to get through, so I will continue to pick up T. Greenwood, but this was not a favorite. This was, I guess, literary fiction, not a favorite of mine. So I would say you could probably skip this one and read Keeping Lucy instead if you're interested in picking up Tea Green. Next, I listened to Malice House, and I listened to this because my friend Jessie from the channel Reading with Jess discussed this with Keisha from A Book Like You on Jessie's channel for the Sleep When I'm Dead book club. And I am also giving this one 2 stars. We've had quite a few 2 and 3 stars this month. So Malice House by Megan Shepherd, and I am definitely not the target audience for this. I should have known when it had the word monsters in the synopsis that I wasn't gonna like it, but I thought that was just the title of a book called Bedtime Stories for Monsters. Anyways, this story follows Haven, and I love the name Haven for a main character of a book, but Haven goes back to her hometown in Washington State to basically settle her father's estate. Her father was a very successful author that passed away, and so she is trying to settle his estate and everything. She's kind of down on her luck. And she finds this transcript among his things called Bedtime Stories for Monsters. And she starts to illustrate them because that's what she does. She's an illustrator. And then spooky things start happening. So she's not sure if it's the house, if it's her father's ghost. She's not really sure what it is. But these monsters from the story seem to have come to life. And there was a lot of characters that I felt like weren't really necessary. There was a lot of like side subplots. There was a lot of confusion, things that weren't tied up. Overall, this book really didn't work for me. It did a lot of things that I don't like in books. And I'm just not really down with that type of magical realism. If it's like time travel or like something that seems like it would be in the realm of possibility, then I can get down with it. And then the last book that I read in February was The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz, and honestly, I should have DNF'd this, but I was vlogging it, and I shouldn't have let that change the experience, but I kept being sure that there was going to be some sort of good twist at the end. This was going to make it all worth it. There wasn't. So this is about Alex, and Alex is invited to a writing retreat where she goes and spends a month at her favorite author's estate and writes a book. She then learns that her frenemy, who she hasn't spoken to in like 2 years, is also going to be there. So it's angsty. It's a lot of like her having this like sexual awakening, which is fine. I just don't really want that in my thrillers. If you want to write a book about that, write a book about that. But I don't really need 5 wet dreams over the course of a less than 300-page book. And the characters were unbelievable. It was stupid. It was like very like villain-esque, and it just didn't work for me. It got kind of twisty at the end, but it was just like, well, of course that happened. Oh, yep, she's in on it too? Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Double-crossed you? Okay. Like, it was too much. And then I kept being sure that the ending was gonna have a good twist because I had a theory, and I was like, oh, if it ended like this, that would definitely move it like up a star. No, my ending was way better than this. Yeah, pretty disappointed in this one. Really disappointed because it was one of my most anticipated of the year. So that one was definitely a bummer. Okay, that was all of the books that I read in February. Not the best reading month, but I am pretty sure that March is going to be even better. So let me know down in the comments below, what was your favorite book that you read this month? Did you read any of these that I read? If so, what did you think about them? Please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.